Chapter 8, Children and Books. So, children's books have been around for a long, long time. And we'll talk about all of these things. Let's get to the objectives. 3 goals for reading books to young children. The criteria for book selection, which is very important. You're going to need to spend a lot of time with that, or you probably have by this point with the book blog. Suggested techniques for reading a book to a group of children, designing a classroom library center, quality book features, and multicultural and multi-ethnic book use. Most important thing is that your program has lots of opportunities for children to interact with books, to touch them, to, for infants to gnaw on them, for toddlers to throw them around, but opportunities to interact with books. That means books need to be where children can access them. Don't keep all the books up on a shelf because they're special and only teachers can touch them. If you have special books that only teachers can touch, that's fine. But you also need to have oodles of books that children can mess around with, okay? A teacher may be the only connection between a child and a book. Many children don't have reading opportunities, book handling opportunities at home. We need to make sure that that is a primary thing that we are doing when they're with us. And we need to promote thinking skills. So book selections for age and topic, and how do you there's jillions of children's books out there. I would say half of them are good. Any book that is based on a television show or a video game or a movie or a doll is probably not a great choice. You want to look for books that aren't a promotion for some other product, right? So you're looking at lots of different authors. With a lot of books that are promotional, that are trying to promote a product, it doesn't necessarily have an author. And so you want to look for authors. You want to look for people who actually write books, right? You want to make sure it's age appropriate. If they're younger than 3 years old, they want to snuggle up with you and they want to see a lot of visuals and interesting things. If they're older, it's more about the story and they want to know what's going on with people or animals or whatever. So prior to the mid 18th century, the books aimed to help children understand morals and values and spiritual stuff. Right? So they were not stories of fantasy and creativity. It might have been a talking fox, but he was there to teach you a moral. Folk tales tell about the human experience. Storytellers are people who can help fire your imagination, reduce anxieties. I don't know. Aesop's fables. Okay. Books. This is still the history, and this is interesting stuff in your book to read, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. The first picture book for children was the Orbis Pictus, which is very, very old. And it was, someone thought, oh, hey, if I put the words and the pictures together, kids can look at that. And that's what it was. So in the earliest days of America, reading was not considered important for children to learn because they were going to go work on a farm, most likely. And so they didn't need to learn how to read. As the country became more industrialized, we needed people who could read. And so we started teaching it. Picture books. It talks about the awards, the Caldecott Award for picture books. These are just some of the early picture book writers. In the 1950s, as there was a huge baby boom, there was more demand for picture books and nonfiction picture books. And then what we need to understand is that we need to represent all people in our picture books. So from the early days, it was sort of the dominant culture that was depicted in picture books, white people doing white people things. Um, as our country has become much more diverse, um, picture books and children's literature has kept up with that to a certain extent. It's important for you as a teacher to make sure that people in your class, and I mean the children, can see themselves in the books that you have in your library. Do you have African American children? Do you have Latina children? Um, Make sure that you have books that appeal to them where they can see themselves, because a lot of what children learn how they fit in the world comes through what they see around them, right? So we need to make sure that we depict them so that they know that they're part of our community. What do you want to look for in quality books? Character development. Do people learn things? Do they grow? What do they look like? Hope. We can all use some hope, right? Cultural insight. Are you learning about another culture? Look on pages, it says 220, but there's other information that you want to find. Yeah. 220 has a list of what you want to look for in books. And then, well, I'll have to find it later. Promote select books that promote there it is, phonological awareness. So books that have interesting sounds that kids can hear. Award winners are always a great choice. Caldecott and Newbery. Caldecott are picture books. Newbery are a little bit older books, but still for kids. Provide illustrations that promote literacy. Does the picture on the page correspond with the words? Because that promotes literacy, right? So when you're reading to children 1 to 3, you are reading, and so the way you present it is very important. Your primary goal is to help them understand how books work and how stories work and how language works. And you also want them, especially at those younger ages, you want this to be a positive experience so that as they get older, they will think, oh, I like books. I like to sit and read. Um, Teachers say from first to third grade, you're learning to read. From 0 to third grade, you're learning to read. From third grade on, you're reading to learn. So if you think about this, if you start at 0 and you go to school until you're 18 or 22, you spend all of that time focused on reading in a way, right? The first 8 years or so, you're learning to read and, you know, solidifying those reading skills so that then you can use those reading skills to learn more stuff. So reading's super important. And we need to make it a positive experience when they're 1 to 3, because they're going to need to do it for the rest of their lives, certainly, and most specifically for those 20 some years that they're in school. 20, 12, 16, whatever. A secondary goal is to demonstrate the books can be fun and interesting and loaded with lots of information, that you can enjoy them alone or with others. They help children value themselves and provide awareness of cultural diversity. So they see themselves in those books, they see their cultures, or they see other people and other cultures. And they know that those things are important because they're in a book. Um, and then another goal is to demonstrate that books are used to present knowledge. By the time kids are 3 years old, they understand that this book is telling them a story, that there's something that they're learning from that, right? So at that point, around 3 years old or so, 2, 3, whatever, um, they're you want to know that what you're telling them, what you're reading to them is making an impression, right? And you're also going to teach them to use and care for books. Book selection. So on page 228 of your book and in the book blog is the form for analyzing children's books. We want to, you can look on pages 251 to 255 in your, well, that doesn't really help that much. Well, yeah, it does. This whole chapter will help you figure out how to pick books for children, but you want to make sure that you're picking things that are age appropriate, that you have a variety of books in your classroom, not just picture books. You want informational books. You want, nonfiction and fiction. You want books that are even well beyond your children's ability reading wise, but it may have things that appeal to them because it's interesting. I'm looking on my shelf for books right now. So, yeah, here's one. Okay, this is a book that you look at. This is Building, and you look at this, and this has a lot of little words and pictures and stuff. But this is a fantastic book to put in your blocks area because it's got all kinds of structures that can be built. This could be in a 4-year-old classroom. Look at all the pictures that they can, point out and learn about things. They don't necessarily have to know what the words say. They're learning by what they can see there. Okay. All right. Encourage imitative reading. Read to children daily. Okay. You should absolutely read at least a book a day. You should be reading books over and over, and you should be reliving parts of the story and having kids make up their own stories about the book that you're reading. What I like to do is, and I think I include this in Cobra somewhere, you need to have a book of the week. So this is a book that you're probably going to read 3 times at a minimum during the week. You may read it in group time. You may read it in small group time. You may read it while they're eating their snack. But the book of the week, you should be reading out loud no less than 3 times. The first time, just read it. The second time, before you read it, ask them what they remember from the last time from when you read it before. And then the last time that you read it, the third time or the fourth time or the fifth time, have them tell you what's going to happen, right? When you sit down with a book and you say, I have a book that I'm going to read to you today. It's called What's Your Sound, Hound the Hound? Don't do the thing where you say, what do you think this is going to be about? Because they don't have any idea, right? Make sure that the first time you read through the book, just read through it. Just read right through it. Don't do a picture walk. Don't do any of that stuff because you lose kids, right? You have a limited amount of time to read a book and have children's attention. So just read the book. So today we're going to read What's Your Sound, Hound the Hound by Mo Willems. He wrote the words, the story, and he did the pictures. What's your sound, Hound the Hound? Woof, 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 woof. What's your sound, Chick the Chick? Beep. What's your sound, Cow the Cow? Moo. What's your sound, Bunny the Bunny? Oh. Sounds like somebody needs a hug. Okay. Then read it again, talk about it, stop and answer questions as you go. But make sure you get through it once without any sort of anything else. Just read the book, right? Here's an idea for kids that I used to do with my 3-year-olds and other kids. I did it with older kids too, but 3-year-olds seem to really like it. After snack, there's that awkward time where some kids are done with snacks, some kids are ready to go outside, and you have people doing different things. In my class, when you were done with snack, after you cleaned up your place, threw away your stuff, you went and you sat in the reading area. There was a basket of books on the floor, and you got to pick out a book, and you could look through the book. And then after everybody was done and everybody was sitting in the reading area with a book, we would have book reports. And I would say, okay, who wants to tell me about the book that they read during reading time? And, some kids' hands would go up, some kids' hands would not. And so I would say, okay, Ella, what book did you read? Well, I read, now this is 3-year-olds, right? So I read this book. Okay, Ella, what do you think the name of that book is? I think it might be sledding. Well, actually, it's snow. Can you see all that snow? Right. Okay, Ella, that looks like a good book. What did you think of that book? Well, I thought it was good because it had a lot of pictures of kids doing fun things in the snow. Can you show me your favorite picture in the book or your favorite part of the book, Ella? Yeah, I liked this part because there was a horse and a sleigh and they were riding in it. Cool. Well, Ella, do you think that this is a book that we could read to the rest of the class? Do you think the rest of the class would enjoy it? Yeah, I think they would. So I just asked a few simple questions, and it had they were readers. She couldn't read the words in the book, but she could read the book and give me a book report. And it was fantastic. And it was amazing to me how many kids really got into that. So that's a cool thing you can do. Another thing that is interesting is when you have a group of kids and you'll do group time and read a book. You should leave the book that you're reading, the book of the week, in the group area so kids can touch it, read it themselves, whatever. How often it happens that someone will then conduct their own group time and read the book to other kids. Literature for conflict resolution. Select stories to address and define problems. Use text and illustrations to help children visualize, build empathy, resolve conflict in stories, give examples of peacemaking. We had a problem at one point with a child who used bad words all the time, and he was infecting the rest of the class with bad words. So we used a book called Albert's Bad Word, and I can't find it right now. There it is. Albert's Bad Word is a great book to use in a class where somebody is having a problem with using bad words. You read the book, you talk about what happened with Albert, you talk about what happens when you use bad words. Using books for helping kids understand what's going on in their world, whether it's conflict resolution, it's using bad words, whatever. Seeing it in a book helps children understand it in their own world. Multicultural children's literature depicts any distinct cultural group through accurate portrayal and rich detail, offers opportunity to recognize similarities, value differences, and respect common humanity. We'll talk about this a lot. You have some articles and discussion to do about multicultural and multi-ethnic books. You need to find books that introduce children to concepts beyond what they already know. And that means introducing them to cultures beyond their own and helping children who belong to non-dominant cultures find a place for themselves in the classroom. And there are a lot. There are more and more of those all the time. Reading to books. You need to carefully plan and evaluate techniques. You need to enjoy reading to children. You need to strive to make children's book contents relevant to each child. The last thing that you should do is just pick a book and start reading. If you're reading a book to a class, you need to have read it before. You need to read it through. You need to think about what are the things that I'm going to highlight when I read this to kids? What are the questions kids are going to ask me about this? What are the new words that are going to come up and when we're reading this? How am I going to make this interesting? On page 237, There's some tips on how to read to children. Most importantly, make it fun. Make it fun. That's how they learn. Just make it fun. Make it fun and make it relevant. Be sure that every child can see the book. Best thing when you're in group time, have everybody be seated, grab your book, hold it up, say, who can see my book? Raise your hand if you can see the book. If you have people who haven't raised their hands, say to them, can you please move where you can see the book? This is where I'm going to hold it, so you need to sit where you can see it, right? Watch for distractions. Are there toys around your group area that shouldn't be there that are going to, take people's attention away? Have other alternatives for uninterested children. It is okay if a child is not interested in a book and doesn't want to sit in group time, but have something else for them to do, right? Especially younger children, 2s and 3s, sometimes they just cannot sit there for group time today. And so, Henry, if you cannot sit or don't want to sit and listen at group time today, why don't you go over and sit under the table and play with Legos or whatever, right? Use visuals. Let me see if I can find this one quickly. I should have done this all before I started, but okay. So this is a book called Bunny Money, and it is a Max and Ruby book. And what I have done is I took some of the illustrations from the book and scanned them and blew them up so that we could make some puppets. So there's Max and there's Ruby, and they're literally just color copied and what's that called? Enlarged and laminated. So I can read the book and I can have people hold the puppets, or I can hold the puppets. Here's a bus that Max and Ruby can ride on, right? Excellent. Have after reading discussions. What did you think of that book? What was your favorite part? Why do you think that Max was so mad? Why do you think the grandma thought it was funny? Right? Just ask them. Promoting the use of books. Dramatizing favorite stories in books. Have them act it out, right? Or have them tell you the story again with the puppets. Once you read this book, put the book and the puppets in the reading area so that they can play with it. Using as the basis for theme instruction. So one thing that is fantastic is to do a whole theme on books or an author. We'll talk about that a little bit. Using a literature-based curriculum for each thing that we're going to do. We have books, right? Flannel board activities similar to this. You could just put flannel on the back of these instead of putting popsicle sticks on. Or another thing is if you have a whiteboard that is magnetic, you can put magnetic strips on the back and put that in your library area. Child and teacher authored books. Have kids make illustrations, tell you what they are, you write it down, and then make a book out of it. And book areas and centers. Every classroom should have a book area. Okay. And then there's information in your book about finding reading materials, favorite children's books, family influences on reading like behaviors. One thing that I think is really important is to help parents find appropriate books. And one thing that we did in my classroom was at my school actually was each month we would send home a form that had the favorite books that we read this month or this week or whatever, and also asked kids to bring in their favorite books. So they're bringing in something from home to share, so we know what they like. And then we're also sending home to parents, oh, your kids really like Little Blue Truck or whatever. So there's so many things. I wish we were actually in class together so that we could talk about this. But there are a lot of great websites that help you find books, and I hope that using the book blog is helping you find books that are appropriate and know what's an appropriate book and what's not. So there you go.